Welcome to the Spiritable podcast. My name is Luke.
I'm Richard, and I just got my master's degree in divinity.
Everyone has a different perspective, so we're bringing on all sorts of people from different walks of life, like Jewish, Buddhist, Christian, atheist, and more, to discuss the biggest spiritual and moral questions and how they see it in their philosophy.
Our goal is to find where we agree and disagree, and hopefully challenge ourselves to be better people in the process.
Together, we shall dive deeper and get weirder.
I felt pretty good.
Welcome to the Spiritable podcast. We are joined for our fourth time by our good pal, Wes Lockard, who was on one of our earliest
OG
episodes.
guests, yeah.
And has been a recurring guest, I think our only recurring guest.
Wow.
Yeah, you hold a special place in our hearts, Wes. If you listeners and or watchers out there haven't seen previous Wes episodes, we recommend you go back and test him out so you get a feel for his very, very bland personality.
Well, yeah.
He's very mundane, so if you need something to fall asleep to,
Yeah.
this is a great episode. I also will say, this is especially an episode to watch the video for. That's all I'm going to say about that.
What are you referencing specifically? Wes vomiting?
Well, I don't know if it's going to make it in, but I feel like, what about the pinchy hands thing?
Oh, the pinchy hands. We got to have do pinchy.
Wes talking about the things in his room that he would save. Wes doing this just now. Yeah, that's going to be even worse if it's just audio content.
My desk is covered in spit.
Oh, no.
It's like a big puddle from between the tea bags and this thing. It's so wet.
These episodes are a disaster.
All right, I think that's good enough. I think that's good. I think I did it then.
Yeah. Okay,
Welcome to the
cool.
show.
Yeah, we're rolling into it.
Mwah, beautiful.
Boop.
I one time fell asleep in my bed eating hummus. And I
Can that please be how our episode begins?
Well, hold on. Okay, I should start this by saying, have any of you ever fallen asleep with food in your mouth?
No.
No, what? That's the wildest thing.
Certainly,
I feel
have,
disgusting if I don't brush my teeth before I go to bed.
I know, that's the worst. So this is like that, but times 3, because like I was so tired. I was so tired because I only slept for like 2 hours the night before, and I was sitting in my bed eating some hummus, and I'm like, all right, I should go to sleep. And then as there was like food, like cracker and hummus in my mouth, I fell asleep sitting up, and I woke up like again 2 hours later, and the food's like still in there, but it's just been sitting in your mouth for like 2 hours. It's horrifying.
Fermenting.
Yes. Your mouth is turned into a compost heap.
Oh, my gosh.
Welcome to the
horrendous.
Spiritable podcast. You
The only
probably
time I
recognize
ever woke up where I
Wes
wasn't...
by his voice and topic of conversation. Did you talk to Wes about what we want to talk about at all?
I gave him a little rundown. On that.
Sick.
Okay, Wes, look at your camera right now. See what it sees. If there was a fire in your house and you could only take 3 items from what is visible in the camera, what do you take?
Oh.
And why?
Wait, and like living things don't count?
Yeah.
There's no. Is there more living things in your camera than just you?
Yeah, well, oh no, my spider roommate you can't see, I guess. But he's been here since I've been here. He's a homie. And my My Little Pony microphone isn't in frame, so I guess I can't take that.
Nah, it's out. It's burning in the fire.
I can see my Switch. I can see an empty Pringles can. That might be kind of neat.
Little memento.
Well, if I need a new house and I move into a cardboard box, I could turn it into a chimney, I'm thinking.
All right, Wes, it's been a long time since we had you on the show. We need a paunch update. How's that paunch doing?
Oh, the paunch?
Yeah, how's the paunch?
I did a photo shoot with my family with Bruce Crunland, and in as many photos as I could, I was trying to sneak my belly into him, and he kept yelling at me to put the belly away, and it's not that kind of photo shoot, but it's coming along pretty nice.
I feel like it's you've maintained the paunch.
Yeah.
I think it hasn't grown or shrunk in any significance.
It's a proud masculine paunch, if I do say so myself.
A PMP.
But to keep it up, I've had to start putting like 8 tablespoons of sugar into my tea.
And shout out to the original BioShock game, our sponsor for this episode.
It's true. I bought this for $5, even though it's like an extra large from a discount bin in Hot Topic when I was like 15.
Love it. Love it. Well, so welcome back, Wes. Your fourth appearance on the Spiritable podcast, I think.
Yeah, I think
Sick,
so.
Nice.
I remember we talked about the internet and Sonic, both the character and the fast food
I forgot about
place.
the Sonic chat.
Oh yeah, me too.
A real big throwback. I want to talk about politics and religion.
Uh-oh.
This has been something that's been on my mind recently because we're in a very political environment these days. And as a minister, it's a strange place to be in to want to talk to what's happening in the world and also not be like, you should vote X candidate from the pulpit, because I don't think that's really what the use of the pulpit is.
Right.
So it's been this weird little...
Well, should we dig into that? Why is that not a useful thing to be on the pulpit? Because if so many of like our political views and our spiritual views come down to what we want from humanity, shouldn't you try to affect a change there in a way that you think is positive?
I just don't feel like I understand the grand landscape of politics enough to be sure that I'm giving people good stuff if I'm telling them who to vote for from the pulpit. I feel much more confident that I understand the Bible well enough to give people good stuff from that. And I trust the Bible and what I think that God said more than I trust what any politician will ever tell me.
Preach.
That's fair.
So like as much as people, as I believe a certain political viewpoint, because it sounds like it's going to be best for humanity, that could be a bunch of people being real good at lying to me about it. I don't know. I'm just working with the best I got.
Right.
And also I think more than just my comfort with it, I think that, first of all, a church that tells people what politics they should follow, what like specific political parties they should follow, is going to lose a lot of their reach. And I think that hopefully what God has to say is for everyone, not just Democrats or Republicans or Libertarians or Green Party, whatever. So it's just not that useful for me to have a strong and specific political stance.
It's not your area of expertise.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also, I mean, I think you're totally right on, like, turning people off, but I think you can walk a fine line and do both by paying attention to the news and what's going on and just pulling from, like, the Bible or the writings and just talking about issues rather than saying, like, Jesus said to feed the hungry, so vote for this guy. It's much better to just leave it at, this is what Jesus said, and then assume that people will be smart enough to put the two and two together.
Yeah, and it's very interesting. I preached a sermon, not the Sunday following, but the next Sunday after the events at the Capitol on the 6th of January, because I felt like that was a big thing that just happened to our country. It feels disingenuous to not talk about that.
Yeah.
And so my topic was, what does the word tell us about love of country and how we should love our country? And I made a clear effort at the beginning to be like, look, I'm not telling you what political ideas to have. I'm just saying there's a lot of tension in the world right now. We as a religious community all agree that the word is a place we can all go to. So let's just all sit back and just listen to some things the word says. I think it was much... Yeah, it's an interesting line to walk, because in a a tense environment, everyone is primed to hear you saying something, whether you are or not.
Right.
So it was kind of like, when I say that sentence, what might people hear? And how can I help people hear the word, not and trust me that I'm not trying to pull one over on them and secretly attack their political belief or whatever, you know? So it's a weird, it's strange to talk about current events when current events are politics from the pulpit.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, you're so right. Like, people are gonna be listening with like their own confirmation bias to what you're saying, and like either, and yeah, that's so tricky because yeah, if the more specific you get, like I definitely agree with you that if I were in your position, I would feel like you have to address it somehow, but like you have to be so careful because you're gonna turn people off so fast if they even like suspect what you're saying doesn't already align with their preconceived notions in a tense environment like that, let alone most times.
Yeah, and yeah, it's strange because it's not like I'm trying to make sure they don't figure out my secret plan. Like I'm being hyper careful because I know that when you're feeling raw, just the wrong phrasing can be really upsetting. You know, everyone's had that experience where someone didn't mean to say something that offended you, but you're really raw about the situation, whatever that situation might be, and so you take it a way they didn't intend. And when it's like the whole world is raw or the whole country is raw, it's a wild environment to try to speak in, especially speak publicly. But Luke, I want to get back to what you were saying about this idea of spirituality versus political belief.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's a question that I've had recently, and I've heard people say, you know, according to a bunch of different topics, like, I am this political party because I'm this faith, which is really interesting. Yeah. Or because my faith says this about this thing, right? My faith says that everyone should be free.
Tend to the meek or something like that.
Yeah. So I'm this party, or my faith says that freedom and justice are above all else, so I'm this party, or, you know, whatever. And I guess my question that I've been pondering is, what is the interaction you should have between your worldview belief and your political belief, and where should the two differ and why? Is something I've been thinking about.
I think the order of that is really important. I think in order to have political beliefs that you stand by and are secure in, you first need to have like your own personal stuff figured out. Like, you need to know who you are and what values you have, and then if those are the same ones you want to apply to political beliefs, you know? Like, so I think there obviously is an intersection because it all comes back down to how you want to treat people, how you think people should treat people, and that is both a spiritual and a political thing. One, they're just regulated differently. One is interpersonal and the other one is external.
Yeah. And I've been thinking, going with that, I think there are also times where your spiritual belief doesn't necessarily translate into your political belief. Because I think there are times where I'm like, this belief helps me be a better person and is how I want to live, but that doesn't mean that I want to enforce this onto everyone.
Well, okay, so let's get specific.
I wouldn't want to say, I think that Jesus Christ is God of the universe, and therefore everyone else in America also has to proclaim that. You know, because I put religious freedom in the political environment above my specific belief in a deity.
But like, worship isn't a political thing.
Well,
Sorry,
but
Wes, what were you gonna say?
But it is in a lot of countries that don't have religious freedom.
Well, that's dumb.
I mean, I don't even see why it has to go to the place of like, I believe this, so everyone has to. Like, I feel like that's like a really big leap from saying like, I believe in this, because like that thing that you're saying that you like believe everyone should be able to have their own choice is what allows you to believe that in the first place. Like you're just saying.
But I feel like it comes back to whether you see your worldview as the best, the worldview that leads to the best world and the most happiness, or the one that leads to the most happiness for you. Because if it's objectively the most happiness, then it's what everyone should be doing, right? And so shouldn't we be pushing for a political system that supports the best way for people to live?
As opposed to
one that supports people's freedom to choose how they live, I guess.
Okay, I see what you're saying. I think, at least for me, I've really been trying to narrow the scope of politics because I've been becoming so obsessed with it, and it's like emotionally affecting me to the point where I'm just like, I got off Facebook, I got off like almost everything. I wasn't paying attention to the news. And like when all that Capitol Hill stuff happened, I wasn't like even paying attention, and I just heard about it from other people. And I was like, hey, cool. I'm kind of glad that I'm not in on all this, because I would be like reading all these articles and obsessing over it, and it would be ruining my days. And, you know, I'm not saying that being detached like that's good. I really don't like being detached like that. But at least for me, I think with politics, I'm kind of over talking about stuff that I'm not like... I just want to focus on the basics, at least for me at this point. Like, religious freedom and all that is like, cool, that's a given. Why don't we have healthcare? Why don't we have transportation figured out? Why do we still have to fight about it? Like, all these things to me that should be givens, and in many countries are given. In most countries are givens. Like, I don't know. That, at least for me, that's like the only stuff I'm really trying to focus on in my life at this point.
Politically.
Things that I feel we should have sorted out decades ago, you know?
Yeah, common sense stuff.
Yeah.
But I think what's common sense for one person is deeply complex for another, you know? Like,
oh, for sure. That's why we can't get anything passed.
Yeah. And I think so much of what you define as common sense comes from your worldview and how you think people ought to be treated and what basic rights you think people deserve.
Right.
But I think a lot of that comes back down to how humans affect other humans, not just like belief or philosophy about the afterlife or whatever. Like, so I don't think, you know, regulating in government how people worship or what God people should believe in makes any sense. But I think the intersection is where people affect other people, like in providing healthcare or establishing like laws that govern citizenship to prevent harm. I think that's where you see a lot of crossover between spirituality and religion, or spirituality and politics.
So what if you were of a faith that thought that if you didn't believe in their deity specifically, then all that awaited you is damnation after death? Wouldn't you want a culture that promotes the only path that prevents you from eternal torture?
I don't think that's the government's problem. Like, I don't think that would be a government thing, because it's an eternal issue, not a worldly issue.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that it shouldn't be, but I think it is for even up through our lifetime. Like, that's why there was such a fight to get gay marriage passed, because people are like, well, it ruins the fundamentals of my straight marriage, you know? Mm-hmm. Even though I totally agree that shouldn't even be on the table. It should just be, again, a given, common sense sort of thing. But you are right that, like, those two things are gonna.
Yeah, so I think that's where we go wrong when we try to put those things together. Like,
so then, do you think that government should only have the like keeping civil order in mind? Government shouldn't try to push any sort of morality?
Well, I mean, you could argue that there is morality in how citizens treat each other.
Yeah, but so is the end goal for a orderly population or for a moral population?
Orderly, I think in government, orderly.
So
Yeah.
government is just as successful if everyone obeys the laws to a T and hates each other. And I know this is an impossible example.
Well,
But-
Yeah, that would be a successful government. I mean, you have successful dictatorships. It doesn't mean that things are happy.
Well, I think we look at dictatorial governments and say, like, that's a bad government that needs fixing because the people aren't happy and the people hate each other and hate their lives, right? A
Yeah,
government
but I think I guess it's more like an active role versus a passive role. And I think the government is sometimes best when it's a passive role in basically preventing harm to people and then leaving people in the freedom to do good to each other and thus be happy, but not actively forcing people to be good. Like, it's not like when I'm nice to people, the government gives me a stimulus bill. It's if I go and slap Wes in the face, I pay a fine, you know?
Well, but isn't like something like Social Security kind of government enforced being nice to each other?
I mean, that's
Right?
preventing harm to old people who can't fend for themselves. It's
Yeah,
caring
but
for
it's-
our citizens.
But it's caring for them using the money of other people. It's basically forced charity, right? If you
Well,
look
so
at
that
it
just goes
way.
into like socialism versus like capitalism.
right. Right.
Yeah, and I think socialism, in a lot of ways, preaches as its goal, kind of like a forced caring for each other, an
But I don't
implicit,
think-
a built-in caring for each other.
Do you think that makes people better being forced to do that?
I think, well, so with
Like,
specific,
I don't think I have any spiritual boons because I pay my taxes. I mean, sure, render to Caesar what is Caesar's, sure. But it's not like I'm like,
Hey.
yay, I get to pay my taxes.
I was reading that last night.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Nice. And then you put some ranch on your salad instead of Caesar dressing just to stick it to the man.
but
Wait, were you
I
reading
think
the Bible last night?
I
That's in the
was.
Bible?
That's Matthew. What is it? 24.
Yo,
that
Wes
seems
reading
too
the Bible
late in
over here?
Matthew.
Yeah. I've changed a lot since I've been on.
Matthew 24 is the destruction of the temple.
Oh no. Well, it's something in Matthew around there. Maybe it's 22.
Yeah, 24 seemed a little late.
But 22 also has, maybe, if it is 22, maybe my favorite part in the Bible ever. Two parts that make me laugh very hard. Maybe I shouldn't say that. But I think they're so silly. Even though I do get the underlying theme, just the way it's presented. When Jesus is walking just down a street and he's like, I'm hungry. And he looks and sees a tree and he's like, a fig tree. And there's no fruit growing on it. And he's like, screw you! You're never gonna grow any fruit again! And I just like to imagine that's the one time he lost his temper. He's just hungry. And it's just like, this tree sucks! And then he tells a story about a guy who's like, hey, everybody come to my kid's wedding. It's going to be great. And everyone's like, your wedding sounds stupid and lame. And now we're going to also kill your servants for daring to invite us to such a dumb wedding. So he's like, all right, just invite a bunch of homeless people, I guess. Whoever you see, just invite them. And then there's a guy there and he's like, hey, friend, you're not up to dress code. And the guy just goes, and he's like, tie him up and take him into the wilderness and leave him there so he can cry and gnash his teeth. And then he's like, do you get it? Do you get the story? I love it. Makes me very happy.
There's a lot to unpack there.
I'm sorry, I don't want to get off topic. I just really, those stories make me very happy.
Oh, that's great.
I feel like there are definitely times where it's okay to laugh. I find that I often laugh with the Bible. I don't. I like to think I don't laugh at the Bible, but I think people need to be more comfortable laughing with the Bible.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I'm not reading it and I'm like, this is so stupid. What the heck is he talking about? Like, I get it. Like I said, it's just the way it's presented is like maybe, I guess, dated or something. I don't know. It's just very silly. The way it plays in my head, I guess. I live in cartoon world.
I always like, because the Bible moves along at like a blitzkrieg pace.
Yeah,
like,
it really does.
You read 3 paragraphs and 20 years go by. So like, I just like imagining what happens in this space in between the years. Like, what's his face working for Laban for 14 years for 2 different wives. Richard, come on.
You got it. No, you got it.
Joseph? That wasn't Joseph.
Nope.
No, come on.
It's a J name. You got there. Later
Job
renamed
Obadiah.
Israel.
Judah? No.
Blank and Esau.
Job.
This is Jacob.
Jacob. Thank you. I
Dang
had
it.
so many J names around my head. Oh, it's cut. So Jacob works for 7 years, marries Leah. 7 more years, marries Rachel, and like boom, Bible's like that. But like, is he just chilling? Like, what is he doing for those 7 years? Being like, oh, all right, 6.5 more years.
Sees Rachel and he's like,
there's just
we
so
got goofed, but I'll see you in 6 years, girl. You know.
Oh man, then just so much time moves by. Or like Jesus is a kid and then he's 30.
Yeah.
I fill in those gaps. I want to know.
There's all sorts of speculation about what Jesus does.
Some
"Oh,
people think he came to North America?
The Mormons, yes.
Oh right, yeah.
Yes.
What's your hot take on that, Richie?
I don't know enough about Mormonism to have a hot take on Mormonism,
Fair enough.
but I do know that didn't happen.
Richard told me that they're behind the scenes. He doesn't want me to say this on the podcast, but he said they're big silly heads, and that
Too true.
He thinks when they talk, all he hears is yap yap yap, and it's all a goof. It's all a big gaff.
I hear all Mormons like the Peanuts characters hear adults. I'm just kidding. Mormons
are very
are sweet people.
Some of the nicest.
But a lot of people are like, oh, Jesus went to the East. A lot of people like to say that a lot of people went to the East because Westerners are big into pop Eastern culture. Mm-hmm. They're all about it. So they're all like, Jesus went to the East and studied Buddhist meditation. And everyone's like, maybe.
Did he do
Sure.
did he do Karma Supla?
That sounds like a that sounds like a wrestling move.
The Karma Sutra!
Dawson wins.
Anyway, spirituality and politics.
Wait, so what was the train of thought we were on with that?
We were talking render to Caesar's what is Caesar's. You were saying there's nothing moral I gain from paying taxes.
Oh, yeah.
Right,
So
like, yeah.
Denarius.
So like, I don't think the government mandating me to love the neighbor helps me actually love the neighbor.
But I mean,
Change my mind.
All right, 2 thoughts about it.
All right,
First thought, maybe
Wesley.
it doesn't.
You would thought.
Maybe it doesn't matter whether it helps you because it helps them, right? And you can learn on your own time.
Okay.
And second thought, maybe it is a big picture modeling of how we should behave. You know, if our government takes care of our poor and our disenfranchised, then maybe we see it and we're like, oh yeah, that's how I should treat people because that's how my government treats people. That's how my environment treats people. So it's not like our government doing it gives us props toward our spiritual destination, but maybe it's helpful.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
then-
I think it's definitely helpful in creating a broader moral society. Is it
But
the
then it gets
obligation
into the
of government?
weeds.
I don't know.
But then it gets into the weeds of whose morality.
Whose morality is it
And-
anyway? I love that show.
That's barely a joke.
No, I really like that. Colin just punches someone in the audience and then everyone has to be like, was that right? And he's just going the whole time.
Wes, you were going to say something.
I was gonna say that like I don't think I get what you're saying, Richard, but I think fostering an environment of a morality based on something like human rights or taking care of people is very different from starting from an outset of we need to like defend morality or enforce morality, because then you get into the whole weird like FCC territory about being like we're not going to allow this on air because it's distasteful. Even if you're following all the rules on the book, it's distasteful. And I mean that just I don't think works. I think you're just going to get like
censorship.
Yeah, you're just going to drive people towards the things that you're suppressing because now they're suddenly alluring and cool.
I think it comes back to the government providing for people to be the most free that they can be. And that comes with providing for elderly people or sick people.
Yeah.
Like, I've always loved the phrase, socialism for what we need, capitalism for what we want. And I feel like that always makes sense to me. Like, we need healthcare. We need to take care of sick people. We need basic survival. And then we want a lot of extra stuff.
Right.
Yeah. So I think humanity's happiest and most moral, like even if you look at fulfilling our most basic needs, like if I don't have to worry about where I sleep at night or the next meal I'm going to have, or if my arm's going to break or I'm going to get in a car accident, if I don't have to worry about those things, I have more freedom to be a better person. Like people who are struggling to survive don't have the luxury of worrying about if they're being good, moral, and spiritual people.
Exactly.
You talk about some Maslow's
hierarchy of needs, baby. You got to fill those tanks up.
Yeah.
Yeah, and on top of that, we talk about how like I think that a world of access to mental health would do huge benefits
I think we're getting
to the
there.
way the world
I do think like
works.
I think we're getting there. Like people are more inclined to talk about therapy and mental health and like even it's becoming more common nomenclature for people to take a sick day as a mental health day, and that was not really a thing before, and I think we're coming around to that, which is great.
Yeah, there's I won't name names, but like an elderly.
Please do. Please, I feel strongly. Please
it was your dad. An elderly person in my life who I'm not like particularly close with mentioned, I forget exactly what they said, but they mentioned something about, I remember, they were sweeping, and I was like, do you want any help with that? And they're like, no, my therapist said like I should spend like at least 15 minutes a day cleaning something, that would be good for me. And I was like, whoa, I would never expect you to be that open about being in therapy or things your therapist told you. Like,
Yeah.
That is so not your generation at all. Crazy to me. But great.
Yeah.
I mean, I love it.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. So is that something that a government should be expected to give people, mental health treatment?
Absolutely.
So
100%.
then should the government be responsible for spiritual health treatment in all the ways that might be distinguished? Right? More than just is your mental health, but your moral health, your spiritual health. Right? Because if we're talking about different aspects, if we say yes to physical health, yes to mental health, why do we then cut it off at spiritual health?
I'm coming in. I have this thought. I think the reason that spiritual health can't be regulated by the government is because people don't agree that it exists. It is not a thing that most people, I don't know if most people, a lot of people would even say exists separate from mental health. And I think even us as people who do a whole podcast talking about spirituality might have a complicated time defining the separation of the two things.
Okay, well, what about like moral health?
I'm out of here. Bye.
If we want to take it out of the realm of spirituality,
Moral health?
Yeah, moral health. You can be totally mentally stable and comfortable and still be a ripe a-hole.
Mm-hmm. So why don't we just get rid of parents entirely and just raise all kids in little like government camps? Yeah. by the
Well,
state.
we already
and they
do
can just
that. We literally do that.
It's called foster care. No, I mean they have foster families.
It's,
I thought Wes was going to talk about like families detained at the border.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
I thought
that's
you were getting spicy and
really
just
dark.
talking about actual school. Like,
Like how we all took a different route.
wait, is school not just the state mandating like a lot of things that a kid has to know and putting them in a
Not
space?
morally necessarily. I mean, yeah, the school has to like act like a fill-in parent when the
Well,
I
parent's
learned
not around.
not to hit in school, so I don't know
Yeah.
about you guys.
That's preventing harm. That's not a moral thing necessarily. It's to keep order.
But they
Only-
didn't teach it. They didn't teach it like you're being distracting. They taught it like it's bad to hit people.
Right, because
I-
it's easier to teach people like that.
Definitely learned about sharing and a lot of like social issues that like you could argue, I guess, either way, that depending on how you look at it, they're either made to keep order or are from a moral place or both in like preschool. Like I learned how to share in preschool, you know? But let me hit you with this one, Richard, real quick. The state does do that with churches. They don't tax churches. The state allows these churches to operate at like 100% profit, so that's a thing. The state
Hashtag
allows
tax Kenneth Copeland. Tweet it out.
Ooh, or Joel Osteen.
Joel
But-
Osteen.
I hate that guy. Anyways, off topic. He's just a anti-humanitarian jerk. But the point is, I think they do allow for that by not taxing these churches and kind of just letting them do what they want in terms of government money and who they owe what to.
Why do churches get away with not being taxed? I don't know. I have no idea. Richard?
I think it's sort of this idea. Well, they're nonprofits.
Okay, but also
not-
like CEOs of nonprofits get away with making tons of money.
Okay, well,
about-
that's a separate problem.
I mean, televangelists, and again, Joel Osteen, like, is not taxed, but I mean, that is definitely for profit.
But he runs a nonprofit organization that happens to have a very large salary for the person who runs it,
Yeah.
which is a system that is abused. But if you look at our whole tax system, it's just the whole thing is a list of abuses of the system.
I just learned today that you can form like an S corp instead of an LLC. Like if you own a company, and an S corp allows you to pay your employees the average wage. So like if you are a business owner and you are your own employee, you're like, okay, I'm paying myself the average wage of this kind of worker, which is whatever, 40 grand a year. But then your business makes 3 million and you just pay yourself dividends as the owner and benefactor of the company. So on paper you make 40 grand, but you're just giving yourself free money that's non-taxed.
Yeah, and so
Anyway.
taxes is a whole weird thing, and I've been trying to shift my mindset about taxes because I feel like everyone thinks, ugh, taxes,
How can I get out of taxes?
possible. But it's like, hopefully, taxes are to help people that need that money more than I do. And so to the extent that I say, ew, what can I get out of?
But it does feel bad.
Help people less.
It does feel bad because as the little guy, we are less inclined to find loopholes and pay less tax than people who have more money who would be taxed normally at a higher income bracket and pay more tax. But since they can afford to get out of it, they can. And that sucks.
Yeah.
And it also sucks is I don't want to play the millennial snowflake card, but I don't know if we're going to get Social Security. I don't know if we're going to get Medicaid when we're
Right.
old. And
But does the fact that you won't get it mean that other people shouldn't?
No, not at all. But it just is annoying to pay into something that we might not even see.
And is the fact that other people aren't doing the right thing with taxes an excuse for us to not do the right thing?
Well, shouldn't that be the government's job, though, if we're all getting back to the government's job?
Yeah, but does us paying less in our taxes help the government make rich people pay more?
No, I'm not saying that.
Yeah, so it as an excuse to seek every loophole for our taxes because rich people are doing it too doesn't really play morally, right?
I'm not saying it.
Oh, okay. Well, fair enough.
Okay, cool.
I mean,
Wes, you were going to say something?
here's the thing, Richard. Like, I couldn't disagree with you more when you say this money is being used to help people, because that's just not.
Say in theory.
Yeah, in theory, but that's
20%
just
of that's
not-
going to our defense budget.
Exactly, and it's just not the case with like congressmen giving themselves a raise every year. And if you look at how much money they've made, like in the time they've spent deciding if we get $2,000 each,
Dude,
and
thank you. I've just been talking about this. Like,
Yeah.
they're squabbling between a $200 difference in so much time
But
that's being like.
And the worst part is they're not debating with anyone. They're debating with themselves for no reason. Like, this is, if you look at like actual figures, this is chump change. This really is not the biggest deal in the world, but they don't want people like us to realize that they have this kind of money to throw around. They don't want us to expect it, which is why you've seen like almost no support throughout the entire pandemic. And other countries like New Zealand like shut everything down. They're like, please don't go to work. We'll pay you. We will pay you probably more money than you were making going to work if you stay home. Here, there's no incentive, and they're like, why don't the numbers go down? Ugh.
Yep. Preach.
Gotta go to work. Gotta go to work. But here's the thing. Here's the beauty of it. Make sure you go to work. Make sure you still flip burgers for $7.25 an hour, 40 hours a week. And when you're done work, go straight home. Don't go out. Don't see your friends. Don't do anything fun. Go straight home. Yeah, like that was ever gonna work. Ugh.
Yep. I hear you, dude. Yeah, I'm on the same page. And that's an example of the government not efficiently doing its job to set humankind up to prosper the most.
Right.
Because it's like, it's preventing harm, it's giving us the freedom to prosper to the fullest extent, where we don't have to worry about these basic things and we can worry about being good people, serving our highest use.
See, I feel like that criticism gets more into a moral place than a civil order place.
What do you mean?
Like, maybe not. Maybe I'm
Because
rethinking it.
the civil order is like, I mean,
People not being impoverished and people not
Yeah.
spreading a global pandemic.
people dying, if you want to say that's like a moral issue.
Yeah, I'll backtrack off of that.
And also, like, in a selfish light, to make a government most consistently efficient and effective, you need to make sure that people can serve in the government and can have jobs and can keep the economy running. Like, you need to oil a machine for the machine to work. You need to grease up those people for the economy to
Oh
work.
yeah.
You know, Wes knows what I'm saying. I'm
know.
talking about copper tone SPF 65. You know.
I like a greased up population.
Turn me on the nozzle setting. You know what I'm saying?
But I contest that I think that our government should have the morality of its populace in mind. And I think we see that in, like, the reason why all nonprofits are tax exempt is because the government is trying to promote philanthropy, because it knows that it's healthy for a more stable and prosperous population. The reason why you get tax reductions from giving to charity is because it's something that the government is hoping will promote a more giving population. So we have certain things, certain moral.
It's a rosy colored way of looking at it.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm too
why
jaded.
else? Why else would that be set up in our government?
Because it's very easily abusable.
Yeah, I think it's the setup. It has a good idea behind it, but I think in
Right.
effect it can be manipulated.
Yeah, but that's not. It wasn't
Pessimistically.
created to be manipulated. After being created, it has been manipulated. But people didn't sit around and say,
I would want to
"Let's
dig into the
pretend we're
history of
giving
some
to
of those
charity."
things, because I do think things like that have been created as, I'm not saying systemically, but I think there have been things, and again, I'd need to look it up, but just my hunch is that, you know, people create things under the guise of philanthropy or charitable giving, and it's just a front for something else. I pinch. I'm a little crab. I pinch.
Man, our audio viewers are real confused in this moment.
That's why they need to get on the YouTube, sucker. Check out Wes's 4x3 90s cam.
Oh yeah.
I don't know. I would contest that this sort of moral suggestion from the government, right? Like, you don't have to, but here are some benefits if you choose to be a good person. I kind of like that as an idea. And you can get into the whole problem of, yes, but then people just do it to abuse it. And is that really creating a more moral population and this, that, and the other thing? But as a theory, I think that holds water. And I think that we judge our government success on a lot of numbers and factors that I don't think are actually success measurements.
Yo, Yang Gang, human capitalism.
Sorry. Yeah, like we judge our
You got it.
the Dow. How much has the Dow grown?
Yeah, I mean,
Say like what percentage of our population is in like what percentage of our child's population is growing up in a loving home?
that is one reason I like the. Sorry, Wes, go ahead. I was going to tangent a little bit.
I was just gonna say, I mean, it's all well and good that we have like this whole Tao Te Ching like element of our government now, but I don't think that's really relevant to the conversation at all. You go ahead, Luke.
I did a report back in college on the country of Bhutan, which is by Mongolia and China, and they're dope. Like, it's a dope country. It's like, I think, the only carbon neutral country as a whole. It like just opened its borders in the 1980s, but it has this thing called gross national happiness that they measure their country by instead of gross domestic product. Instead of GDP, it's GNP, gross national, or GNH, gross national happiness. So they just like have this like complex survey to determine how happy people are. And, you know, in effect, probably doesn't work that well, but I like the mentality of like, let's focus on the happiness of the people. And that is a reason why I liked Andrew Yang, who ran for president in 2020. His proposal of the economy should be focused around serving people, not focused around serving the economy. Because numbers, when they're being told to maximize their progress, are going to serve the numbers, not serve the people. So I like the idea of let's make the economy work for the betterment and well-being of humankind, not just improving the S&P 500.
Yeah, but doesn't that get into if you're trying to measure happiness as your system for government, doesn't?
Oh, I don't think in effect it works very well.
Yeah, because it kind of gets into utilitarianism, right? And
Well, I mean, I don't think you can actually really measure happiness.
well, that's utilitarianism's whole thing.
And any government that's like, here, take a survey. How happy are you? I don't know. That's going to be, I don't know. It's going to work.
And also, I think sometimes things happen that make people better that also make them sad.
Yeah.
In government?
Yeah.
Like taxes? Like, I don't want to pay taxes. Makes me sad.
I don't think like look at like the civil rights movement. Martin Luther King wasn't like, I'm happy because I'm doing this.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And the people that were against it weren't happy, obviously. No one was really happy. But it was progress that.
I mean, that reflects human spiritual improvement. Like, changing yourself into a better person is not always a fun process.
I don't think it ever is a really fun process, honestly.
But on the other side, you are glad that you did it. I'm glad we went through the Civil Rights Act and Civil Rights era, and I'm glad we're kind of having the second round of it now. It's not always easy or fun to be in, and it can be hard when people suffer. But on the outside, when we get past it, it's going to be a good thing. Just like when we figure out something rotten inside of us that we need to expunge and work on. It sucks to work on stuff, but we feel good when it's done.
Yeah.
True that.
Hopefully. Oh, I lost my train of thought. No.
What was?
I was just gonna say that's something that I've been like really thinking about a lot recently in terms of like stuff with ourselves we don't like. Like I've really been trying to pay attention more towards I guess like to get very Swedenborgian with it, like the influences of evil spirits and how kind of like sickeningly comfortable it is to kind of like sink into something like that. Like a really good example is like being really depressed and like feeling suicidal. Like the second you like get those things in your head, I've been trying to pay attention to it, and there is like just this influx of like noise and like you're, at least for me, like I feel pull towards like the depressive mindset where I don't even like, part of me doesn't want to feel better. You know, like it's like, oh, let's work, oh, that's hard. Like it's almost more comfortable to just stay in that like evil spirit world of just like, you know, worm tongue whispering in your ear.
For sure.
But I don't know, that's something that I haven't really like thought about as an adult ever, really. And I've just been trying to pay like way closer attention to like what intangible voices and thoughts I allow into my conscience.
Yeah, that's a great point.
I think that when we zoom that out to like how government might measure its populace, I think an attempt to measure the happiness of a populace would probably more end up measuring comfort or contentedness.
Right.
Because I think happiness is, first of all, more a choice. Second of all, more of a long-term thing than an in-the-moment thing. And third of all, based on moral and spiritual success, not like good things happened. Because good things bring you joy and they bring you contentment. But I think happiness, at least the way I see it, happiness is more of like I am a happy person when I am living the life that I'm excited to live, when I'm becoming better every day.
But I guess, so to play devil's advocate there, and again, I don't think measuring happiness is realistic or even possible necessarily quantitatively. But I think if we were able to do that, I think it's a decent effort to judge if government is doing its job, right? So, because if government is providing for the basic necessities of people and setting them up to prosper, in effect, they hopefully are a happy people, because they have all the tools to do so and they have everything out of the way that would prevent that. And yeah, it's still up to them. But if the government does that effectively and gives people what they need, then they have the freedom to be happy.
Yeah. My two worries about that is one, then you have to talk about what's the path to happiness. And then that becomes a worldview question really quick. And then the whole idea of religious freedom, like we've been talking about, comes into question.
Mm-hmm.
And the second one is, I think if we are trying to measure happiness as a success rate, I think that leads to propaganda real quickly from our government. If we're just trying to get people to think they're happy, well, now our whole government is not.
Well, yeah, but you're twisting the original premise of this whole thing.
Well, no, I think I'm just saying in the natural existence of abuse of power and how it relates to government, I think that could get really scary really quick.
I think anything can get really scary really quick. Government providing any sort of necessity for people can get scary and abusive really quick.
Not if they subsidize Sesame Place.
Ugh. If they would just clean the gutters in that place, it would prevent so much disease from running rampant.
But I think there is kind of like a sliding.
Big Bird's always dripping there, and I don't know why.
Well, that's what happened. That's how Corona started. Was someone bit Big Bird?
Big Bat. The wet market in Sesame Place is just a cesspool.
Wait, guys, did you know that Big Bird in other countries,
Yes!
Sesame Streets is different colors?
I learned that yesterday.
Wait, what?
It's like orange someplace.
Spanish Big Bird is green.
It's green, yeah, in Mexico.
Yeah.
So
Turkey
I
is
thought of that
orange.
because I like to think that in
Wow.
China, it's not even Big Bird, it's Big Bat.
Big bat.
Last time on the podcast, we were talking about how our government should view success and whether we can view it based on happiness or what. Right? That's where we're picking up.
And what's the government's job? What the government's job should be?
Yeah, I still really feel like the government has a responsibility for a moral message to its citizenship.
Yeah, wow, I feel like if that's the case, then you must like really just hate America.
Hey, there is a lot of things to love about America, and part of loving your country is wanting it to be better than it is.
I agree. But I'm just saying, like, the message we're getting right now is, like, be a big gross dragon on top of a pile of gold. Like, that's the end goal.
Yeah.
I feel like that's the message I get. And even as a kid, I was like, wow, I should be rich. I want to be rich.
Yeah, it's hard for me I've never been a resident of another country. I don't know how much that's just kind of a natural human want for more than we have, or whether that is a thing that the American system has specifically curated more than other countries. I just don't feel like I have the framework to know that. But either way, it is bad how much people view monetary prosperity above kindness and charity and trust and spiritual growth and all that.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
I mean, I just think, I don't know. I struggle with saying that government should set a moral example for people, because that goes into, like, is morality universal? And I think there are some things that are.
Yeah, and I think that morality is universal. We just don't universally agree on it. And what I mean by that is there is objectively moral and immoral action, even if people think it is that or not. Like, I am okay with our country making decisions against, saying freedom of speech does not extend to hate speech and calls for violence.
Mm-hmm.
I'm happy about that. And that's clearly a moral choice being made, unless you're saying it's to maintain order, which the call to violence one might be. But, like, I don't know. Why is it not a moral decision for our country to say don't spew hate speech and slander?
Okay, I'll hit you with this one then. I, for my whole life, especially as a teenager, was a staunch defender of freedom of speech when it came to comedy, because I was always of the opinion that, like, the hard thing with that is, like, I was like, it's case by case. It's really hard. Like, it's pretty much impossible to mandate, because you can usually tell when listening to somebody if they mean what they say or if they're kidding. But if there's one thing that, like, the past, like, 2-3 years have taught us, if not 4, is that, like, comedy can be weaponized so easily, and you can say things as a joke while you're thumbing your nose at a certain crowd, and they know you're not joking. But to the rest of us, like, when I was a kid going on the internet, I would read all these, like, horrible racist things, right? And I would, like, always laugh at them, because in my mind, they were all a joke. I'm like, nobody would think that way. That's so antiquated. That's so silly. Nobody would genuinely be that racist. Yeah. And it wasn't until I got older that I was like, oh, most of those people weren't joking at all.
Yeah.
And I just think that, like, I mean, of course, I hate speech is bad and you shouldn't, like, stand for it. But that line is so, I've never been able to quantify that. Well, especially when it comes to jokes, because you can disguise hate speech.
Yeah. Yeah, but I don't want to fall into the argument that because it is difficult and fraught, we shouldn't try.
Yeah.
Right? Because erasing racism is difficult and fraught, and I think that we should try. And there's all sorts of people disagreeing about what constitutes racist language or racist imagery or, whatever. But that's good that we're talking about it, because that's how we work to getting rid of it, even though we're not going to agree for a while about the nitty-gritty specifics.
Yeah.
So saying it's difficult, does that mean that government should say like, so I'll leave that up to the individual? Or is that something we should expect our government to take their best shot at and then listen for our feedback to say, you really missed the mark that time, try again?
Well, that's an important part of this, though, is like, do they or will they hypothetically listen to feedback or just do whatever they want?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's useful to both talk about what government at its ideal should be. And I also think it's useful to talk about like what is plausible, keeping in mind the way that things could be abused. Like you could make a law saying anyone who knocks on your door and says, I don't have money for lunch today, you have to make them lunch. But, people could abuse that. Actually, I kind of love that. Let's make that a law. Like, who can't afford to give a person lunch, right? But yeah, there's all sorts of ways that could be used. If everyone's just walking around getting, there's no such thing as a free lunch. If everyone's just, I just fit. If everyone's just walking around all day getting a meal from every person and not trying to create from that a platform for their own stability, that's not like a great system for ending poverty.
Yeah.
It's like the worst Band-Aid you could possibly put on it. So, the whole thing with like ending poverty and the idea of like, how do we both end suffering and create a system that prevents it from continuing to happen? Because it's one thing to have a soup kitchen, that's great. But a soup kitchen doesn't end our problems that are creating poverty in our country.
It's putting a Band-Aid on it, yeah.
And yeah, again, that's not to say we shouldn't have soup kitchen.
Right.
But how do we actually fix the problem? And I think that there are people that say that support creates dependency. There's that whole argument, and things like that. And so it becomes a really fraught issue, but I don't think anyone is saying we shouldn't try to take care of our homeless population in some way.
Yeah. I wish it was easier to agree on the fundamentals that create the problems in the first place and how to solve those things.
Whew. All right, so I kind of feel like I'm gonna throw some statements out.
All right, hit me.
One, I think there is moral objectivity. I think there are morally good things for a person and for the world. And I think we see that throughout history, right? And I think we call civil things just the things that we're okay with putting in a civil category are just things that are morally universal. Like we're all like, you don't murder because it makes everything chaotic and because we all know it's bad vibes. And so I feel like the things that are moral things that are in our government are generally things that everyone agrees on morally. And I think that how do we add to that list? Because there are, in my opinion, moral things that aren't on that list. And how do we as people and people contributing to a government add to the list so that our country promotes more morality as just like what you do to be with people? Because at the end of the day, that's what morality is. It's how you function with people, right?
Well-
How you function in a society of other people trying to function.
I think the easy answer there was just what I was saying earlier about like, and Luke was saying too about like human rights. I think I said this on the podcast before. I feel like, but like I my ideal future is just Star Trek: The Next Generation, basically. Like I just want people to be able to eat and have a place to live and not have to worry about like their mental or physical health. And I think if we get the basics covered, like that would just be the best thing for humanity possible on a like global level and on an interpersonal level. I think those things need to happen like within our lifetimes, frankly.
Yeah, I think there will never be a reality where people aren't worried about their mental health.
Yeah, but you know what I mean. I like support that is a
Yeah, you know that stuff is out there for you.
right.
Yeah. But so I sort of wait. Oh, I lost my train of thought. No. So I think it's very interesting to define our political belief in terms of this is the belief that I think promotes a more morally upstanding government. Thoughts?
I'm trying to see if I have thoughts about it.
Wait, what did you say?
I think that a person's political belief should be defined as I have this belief because I believe it's what creates a more morally upstanding government model.
Okay. Interesting.
And I think that gets a lot into
So
our leadership and the way it presents itself and stuff.
Yeah, I think
let me give you a dark example of a counterexample. My brain is slowly shutting down because it's late and I'm tired. But what about situations like dropping the atomic bomb on Japan? Like that is not a good moral decision, but you could say that what it prevented from happening, and by protecting the citizens, it prevented a lot of harm. But would you qualify that as an example of the government doing a morally right thing?
I think that depends on what information you're working off of and who you talk to about it. From the recent stuff I've looked into it. So in school, I was kind of taught like, yeah, this was a really rough thing that happened, but more lives would be lost if it hadn't happened. And so I was sort of like, okay. Recently, some of the stuff I've been looking into has made me skeptical that that is a true statement and that it wasn't other motivations for doing things like that.
I think what I'm getting at is I think often morally the right thing is to turn the other cheek. But when a government has a whole populace to look after, it cannot always act selflessly on a global stage. I don't think selfless acts from leadership positions serve the people that they need to serve.
But I don't think that we should be promoting our citizens at the detriment of other citizens of other countries' citizens.
Right. I agree. I think borders make no sense to me. the older I get and the more globalized the world becomes. But
in the same way, like if I had kids, I wouldn't be like, man, I really want to get my 8-year-old a bike for Christmas. So I'm going to steal a bike from the kid next door. Like that's not how you go about that, right?
Banana
Just because
Republics and the like.
Just because my family unit are my dependents doesn't mean that I can lessen the quality of life of those who are not my dependents. And in the same way, a country, just because it is American citizens that they're supposed to be specifically paying attention to, doesn't mean they have to disregard the happiness or the rights of those citizens that are not their charge.
So, but I feel like you're twisting all my examples. Like, so let's even talk about like tariffs. So like charging a higher tariffs on China promotes U.S. industry and like job creation in the U.S., but it's harder for workers in China, but better for our citizens. What's the morally right thing for our government to do?
Yeah, I don't really know on that one, honestly. It's kind of a. So I think part of that gets into what are the working conditions like for workers in America and for in other countries. Like, if we stopped getting shoes from all of the sweatshops around the world and instead made them America, I think we just made a moral progress.
You could make the argument that sweatshops help people in their economies and in their cultures.
Yeah, I think that.
Oh, I don't want this to go on record that I promote sweatshops, by the way. I'm playing
Isolate
devil's
that.
advocate.
Ben, isolate that.
That's going on the Insta.
I'm just gonna loop it a few times.
But yeah, so I think it does get really, really complex quickly. But again, I think it's so important to say these spiritual and moral ideas that we think are universal, not like the ritual that I choose to worship with, but like the universal way that things should work and people should be treated, should be promoted on a governmental level, even though we're going to be bad at it. We have to start somewhere in order to get better.
Yeah, I just think that, and to be a pessimist, I think that sort of mindset on a politically global stage can come at the detriment of the citizens of a country. By operating selflessly or morally, like that would work terrifically if every other country's leadership was also operating that way. But since that's not the case, we're setting ourselves up to be taken advantage of at the detriment of the lives of the citizens of our country. And then I don't think that is beneficial to human prosperity.
Yeah, I mean, we like actively support, genocidal states and coup other governments in the name of cheaper lithium.
Yeah,
cheaper
how is
oil.
North Korea still doing what it's doing? How is Saudi Arabia treating its women horribly?
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, well, even then, like that's one I think about constantly, because it's like, obviously that's the worst, and the more I think about it, the like angrier I get. But there is, as far as I can tell, there's no solution, because how do you roll into Saudi Arabia and be like, stop that, we're making you stop, and we're gonna teach you why that's wrong? Like, obviously that needs to stop, right? But like, I don't know the way you do that, because if you just tell them to stop and go, we're going to educate you and make it so you know better, it's like, well, A, I don't think that would work, and B, like, kind of who are we to do that in a way, you know? I don't know that I can make the call saying, like, that's necessarily a good thing, considering, like, my problems with our society. Like, I don't know. I don't know the solution for that on any level, really.
Yeah.
But it's got to stop.
Yeah, and that becomes kind of a weird precedent.
Right.
Of being like, it's our job to go other places and tell other people how they need to function. And I think that's sort of the drawback to my premise about a government pushing moral behavior, is who decides.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think it just sort of becomes, once enough people all agree. I mean, like, women's right to vote. Just sort of enough people eventually agreed that women counted as people, that they were like, oh, fine.
Yeah.
Did you know it wasn't even until, like, I think, like, the late 70s or early 80s that, like, if you as a woman wanted to go get a credit card, you could not do that without the permission of your husband. I was editing something at work, and someone was talking about that. Some old lady was talking about, like, it wasn't even that long ago that, like, you needed your husband's permission to do this or that, like almost anything monetarily,
That's
like
wild.
you couldn't do on your own.
My wife just the other day went to the bank to deposit a check for our landlord to pay rent, and the guy was like, "All right, like this just has to be like signed and endorsed." And he's like, "I just I need something to show that like your dad has signed off on this." And she was like, "What? Like this is my check?" And he was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, sure, that's fine then." But like,
What?
why is it that when like a 20-something woman shows up to pay rent, you assume that her father is paying her rent?
Damn, you don't know how old your wife is?
That's the takeaway.
I'm sorry.
Speaking of takeaway, we do need to transition and start wrapping up. And to do so, I want to touch back on something Wes hit on in the beginning, which was that Wes was just casually flipping through the good book. And I feel like last time we talked or had you on here, you weren't feeling particularly God-inspired necessarily. So I want to know how your spiritual outlook has shifted from last you were on the podcast.
Well, a lot of it just has to do with actually not listening to what like everyone or anyone really is saying about religion and just reading the Bible. Because when I do that, I'm like, oh yeah, this is cool. Like, I agree with this, and this is good. And, maybe there's an element, again, of confirmation bias there. But at least, like, what I'm going through, like, the New Testament, I'm like, yeah, this guy rocks. I like what he's saying. I like what he's doing. These are all good things and align with my politics, worldview, and morality. That and, like, I guess, like I was saying earlier about getting off of Facebook and not paying attention to politics, I've felt a lot of weight and pressure to know what's going on and have an opinion on it and like be right. Not right in terms of like arguing with other people, but like right by myself. You know what I mean? Again, with like my worldview and everything, I want to make sure that like what I'm thinking and doing and saying are good. And branching off of that, the more I've kind of had like religious influences come back into my life, the more I've been thinking critically about what turned me off from religion in the first place. And I guess I kind of had a realization of it doesn't being anti-religious, certainly, or at least non-religious, wasn't serving me in any way. It wasn't like adding anything to my life other than, I guess, when I was like 19, like a smug sense of like superiority.
Sure.
But it wasn't like making me happy or making me feel better. It was just like a truth I had accepted. And I was like, I'm in complete control of this. It's not like I have to like listen to all of this garbage that other people are saying about religion. It's not like I have to, if I believe in God or have any kind of spirituality in my own life, that's between me and God. That nothing anyone else says or does can change that or should even have any effect on it. So I guess over the past like, I don't even know how long. I've kind of been shifting back towards it, and I think it's safe to say that like I'm definitely spiritual again. And I'm not like before I was turned off to anything like that. And then I guess now that I'm older, I realize that stuff doesn't turn me off anymore. Like I said, I read the Bible or like went to church and I wasn't like the whole time. I was like, oh, you know what? This is like nostalgic. I grew up with this. This is kind of nice actually. And this makes me feel good. And then again, I was like, well, if this makes me feel good and I agree with like the source of all of this, why am I keeping it out of my life? So yeah, it feels good. It feels healthy in a intangible spiritual way that like I was just kind of I didn't have in my life before. And yeah, I don't know. I like it. Feels good.
That's cool, man. Yeah, I like hearing that.
And
Yeah.
I love your premise of like I'm going to go to the source material instead of what other people tell me I should think about it. I think is a really good place to be. And I think it's really necessary for the future of any faith practice to have people be like, wait, is this actually what this says? Are we understanding this right? Like, how do I see this? How does my understanding connect with what's on the page here?
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people have the mentality of like, what X church organization says about the source material isn't what I believe, so I guess I'm not that faith. Instead of like, church leaders I don't agree with what church leaders are saying. Maybe they're not understanding it right, and I need to be the next generation of the progress of understanding in this faith practice. Because all faith practices grow and change over time. And if everyone just bails out of it, then it's left with the things that made people want to leave, which are often bad things. And then there's no way for it to change because you're just left with an echo chamber of the people that aren't offended by the bad thing.
Right.
Exactly.
So
we need you.
Yeah.
So bravo.
Yeah,
Thank you.
And that's easier said than done. I mean, I'm not criticizing anyone who's like, this isn't my vibe, bye. Because like it doesn't have to be your vibe either.
Right.
But to say like, this isn't my vibe because someone who also believes it said a thing I don't like, doesn't feel like, if that is really why a person has moved away, then I feel like they've left behind a lot of the good stuff that was hopefully helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know. I guess like also you could totally I don't know how much this is like just because I grew up with it out of a nostalgia, but there is like definitely a like comfort that comes from like going back to that well. And moreover, there is certainly something to be said from like being like, man, I'm really struggling. Let's see what this book has to say about it, and finding something that resonates with you and putting it into your life, or like at least trying to work on that. There is like very much so something to be said about the kind of my words are failing me, but the like very real tangible comfort that comes from this kind of intangible place is a welcome addition.
It sounds like,
Certainly.
I mean, it creates a personal religion or a personal belief rather than just being someone who's been handed all these books or ideas or sermons or printouts or whatever of other people saying, here's what you should believe, or here's what's good, here's what works. And you've been like, okay.
Yeah, exactly.
This is me now, I guess. Then putting those aside and being like, let me figure it out for myself. Let me dig into what I want to dig into and create a personal connection with God.
Yeah,
or
absolutely.
With belief. I think that's dope.
A personal faith instead of a cultural faith.
Yeah.
And to bring this back to our topic, I think the same thing is true politically. Like growing up in a specific political environment, you have to be able to make that a personal political belief, not just a cultural political belief, to really have it be useful and know that it's what you want to be contributing to the world, right? Because if you're just culturally practicing anything without an examination of it, well, you're not really living your life purposefully. That's kind of just momentum driven living.
Yeah, I'm so opposed to inertia-driven life. That's all.
Yeah, Luke hates those kinetic toys.
I really, really do. Cool, awesome. Well, yeah, I don't know, man. It's good to have you on. Good to hear where you're, how you're developing, how you're moving along in life, and good to
Thank you.
have some fun talks about politics and religion. It's not an easy topic to always delve into, but I like where we went.
Oh,
Wes, I want you to go ahead and give our outro plugs to the audience.
Please do.
You've been on 4 times.
Okay.
It's practically your job at this point.
All right, ready? The Quiznos subs! We love to eat the Quiznos subs! And then Ben put like a 18-bit garbage mat of like basically the honeycombs guy, but his eyeballs are exploding out of his head like he's just been released into deep space. And then play it during the Super Bowl.
We'll get so much traction. We'll get so many subscribers.
Dude, Quiznos is like really definitely relevant and still in
Why
business.
doesn't Quiznos have their mascot just be a big old schnoz and it just goes Quiznos?
I don't think Quiznos exists, is why.
I think they're out. Yeah, I think.
Are they out of business?
I think Quiznos is long gone, yeah.
Because they didn't have a good mascot. Quiznos.
Wes, one of my favorite things about you is that I always know you're going to just utterly ruin something. I never know in what way you're going to massacre it. And so it's always the most fun surprise. I tossed that to you knowing Wes is going to really purposefully butcher this, but I have no idea how it's going to go.
And it's always a delightful turn of events.
That was high praise.
No one could have ever seen that one come.
I appreciate it.
All right, fellas, thank you for being on this podcast. Listeners, and what are you doing? Is that a tea bag?
It really looked like a tea.
Oh, it is a tea bag. Hard cut. Guys, thank you. Thank you all out there for watching and or listening to the Spiritable podcast. If you have any questions, comment down below. Email us at spiritablepodcast@gmail.com. Please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you're listening to the audio, come find our YouTube channel and give us a subscribe and a like because it helps us out. Give us ratings on wherever you're listening to it at. And if you're curious to find more, go find us on Spotify or iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you find podcasts. Thank you all for watching and listening, and I hope you have a terrific evening and or morning and or afternoon.